Hello.
Hello.
For our viewers who haven't seen you before, don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself?
I am Nathan Linnell with Advantage Property Management.
Nice. Very cool. So yeah, Nathan runs a property management company, and we're here to do some real estate myth busting, but property management adjacent. So yeah, before we jump into the myths, when did you start managing properties, real estate investment? When did you start being in the real estate
Real
space?
estate industry?
Yeah.
You want the
Yeah.
long version or the Reader's Digest version or a little in between?
A little in between, yeah.
I got into real estate back in 2001, helping a company that focused on the Hispanic community.
Okay.
And they asked me to be a loan officer. I didn't understand what that was. Started as a loan officer and then evolved into being a flipper, finding properties flipping.
Was this with the same company?
With a guy from that company.
Okay.
And then we had friends and family started asking us to help them buy and sell, but we weren't realtors, so we went out and got our realtor license, joined Keller Williams, continued to do our flipping game and helping people buy and sell. And then the market crashed. You're probably too young to remember that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said you started in 2001.
2001.
I was born in 2003.
There you go. There you go.
But I think I was 5 years old around the market crash.
Anyways, the market crashed. Me and my old partner kind of went our ways, and then I had a company reach out to me for a referral for listing a property for sale. Went out and did that, and they were a property management company. Had a lot of experience in that, doing my own rental properties and managed a portfolio for some investors for a short period of time. I was actually even teaching at Stringham Real Estate School their property management and other things, even though I wasn't a property manager. I was helping teach at Stringham. I taught property management and property management agreements and a couple other classes over there, so I was like familiar with it.
Yeah.
But going back to the story, my brother-in-law worked for a property management company. He sent me a listing referral. I went out on that, and after I got done with the appointment, I called him and said, hey, thanks for the referral. And I go, so what do you guys normally do when somebody wants to sell their property? He said, nothing really, honestly. And I'm like, well, I want to come in and bring you donuts or whatever, being a realtor. And anyways, and it evolved into, well, we're looking for a property manager. I'm like, you know what, I'm not interested in that. Doesn't sound fun at all. No, wasn't looking for it. But then I went in and met with them. And I'm like, oh, I see the potential here. And so I came in to help them develop a sales program for their property management game, and then evolved into me being a property manager to help them do it. And then 15 years later, so I bought into ownership of that company, and we recently sold about a year and a half ago to a private equity firm. And then I stayed on for about another year, and then these guys came knocking, and it seemed like a good opportunity good time to jump ship. So here I'm at Advantage. So I've been in the property management game for the last 15 years.
Okay, wow.
So kind of the main focus.
Yeah,
so
cool.
So good.
Yeah, you seem like a great resource to ask about property management questions.
Yes.
Great.
One or two things I know.
Okay, sweet. So yeah, let's jump right into the myth that we're going to talk about today. We've been on our second season of Sternly Speaking. Our real estate podcast is all about myth busting, and that's why I had you. Yeah, I guess I didn't explain that to you. So yeah, let's talk about.
So you guys are already into your second season of the podcast?
Yeah.
How do you decide what a season is?
That's a great question.
You ever watch reality shows and we're in our 50th season? I'm like, but it's only been on for 10 years. How do you decide what a season is?
I know, I think we just got bored of talking about, well, we knew that we wanted to start talking about myth busting, and it just seemed like a good stopping point, but there was no rhyme or reason. We didn't plan it that well. Yeah. Okay. But go ahead.
So myth, what's a big myth?
Yeah.
I think the biggest myth I hear all the time is that if I rent my property, the tenants are going to destroy it. Yeah. I think the reason why people believe that myth is because you think about it, what news travels the fastest?
Right, bad news.
Bad news. So we only hear the horror stories, but I bet you for every horror story, there's 9 great stories that we never hear.
Yeah, because it's just boring.
Yeah, it's boring to hear that. Yeah, my tenants took care of the property and they pay the rent on time. What's fun about that story? Right. So nobody talks about it. Yeah. So I think that's a common myth that people think that tenants will destroy your property if you rent out your property. And I always say the battle is won at the beginning when you're doing the application process. So if you are experienced and know what you're supposed to be looking for in an application, then you kind of fight that battle at the beginning. If you do a thorough background check, financial check, job check, referral check, your odds go way down that they're going to destroy the property. So I've been pretty lucky over my last 15 years. I've yet to see a tenant that I've put in a property destroy a property.
Yeah.
It's rare that I've seen it where it's gone above the security deposit.
Gotcha. So is that what you would classify? Because I was going to ask, what would you call getting destroyed? But I guess just...
Thousands. You hear the people like, I've heard all the stories. And being in the flipping game for a while, like there's no property that has surprised me over the years. But I have helped owners over the years. I've been managing one property for them, then they have a problem child tenant, and they call me to help them get rid of it. So I've seen properties get quote unquote destroyed, just a lot of damage.
Gotcha.
But like I said, if you do a good background check and do your application process, the odds go way down.
Yeah.
And I always say the professional tenants, the ones who are going to destroy your property, they're not calling me, a property manager. They're calling somebody who's doing it on their own because they know what to say. I feel like they all have their own book that they read, the excuses or the reason you should rent to me or whatever it may be. So they know what to say to make it sound like they're a great tenant.
Gotcha. You've heard it all.
Yeah.
You know what to expect now.
So a property manager, they know the odds of us running the checks that we're supposed to are going to happen. Where if it's somebody doing it on their own, they can probably convince them to rent to them.
So I know that you spoke a little bit to it, what are those checks, again, that you would recommend doing to make sure that your property doesn't get destroyed?
Well, this application process, the background check, make sure you have a legitimate background check done, the financial check, your credit check to make sure that they can afford the property, and job verification, make sure they actually do have a job.
Gotcha.
It's crazy right now with technology, you can fake a lot of that stuff.
Really?
Yes, you can fake the check stubs, you can fake whatever you need to. So you got to be careful to make sure that it passes. A lot of the screening places know the red flags that come up.
Yeah.
And then just verifying, making sure that they're good people that are going to be renting your property.
That's true. I didn't think about that because when I applied for my apartment that I live in now, they actually requested access to my bank account so that they could go in and look at it that way instead of me just submitting.
Bank statement. Yeah. I mean, it's very similar to getting a mortgage, right?
Right.
I mean, mortgage sometimes for a while I thought they were going to ask for a pint of blood. And it's very similar. It's just a faster process, right?
Definitely.
Compared to getting a a but kind of the same process.
And it makes sense now because I'm like, man, I feel like I could just do this through pay stubs, but those can be. It's much it's much harder to fake your actual bank account than those pay stubs. Gotcha. So not to perpetuate the narrative
of destroying properties.
That your tenants are going to destroy the properties, but I want to hear what is the worst that you've seen from a tenant, because I know that you said that you've never put a tenant in that has destroyed your property, but you've been in the industry. So what have you seen?
And then destroyed, I mean, we're talking there's thousands and thousands of dollars above the security deposit.
Gotcha.
The two worst that I've seen, and both of them, like I said, weren't tenants that I placed. They came to me. One was down in Provo when I first started the other company, and they stripped the carpet. They put holes in the drywall. The kitchen cabinets were gone. It was crazy. It was gross. There was mice running everywhere. It was gross.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was at least, I would say, $30,000 in damage. And luckily, when I first took over the property, I went through and did a video of the unit, which helped us in court get a judgment against the prior tenants.
Wow.
So that was one. Another one, I had an owner, I was managing one of her properties, and then, long story short, she kind of got talked into buying a property over in the Cottonwood High School.
Okay.
This was probably the most hoarder house I've seen.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen a lot in my flipping game.
Sure.
But this one took at least 6 dumpsters, full dumpsters to get rid of. We had to do, I've only, so in my career, and I'm talking all of real estate, I have only, and people get another myth is that the evictions are long. That's another myth. It takes a long time to get a tenant out.
Really?
If you know what you're doing, I would say the average time from start to finish, assuming which 90% of the time you're evicting for rent payment, right?
Yeah.
And so 3 weeks, 21 days is probably the average to get a tenant out of your property.
not
Usually
long at
sooner,
all.
but I hardly ever get to that full 21 days. Most tenants have left way before then. So like my whole point of that story is I've only seen the sheriffs show up at the property to change locks 3 times in my career.
Wow.
2 of them were properties I was buying.
Okay.
So it wasn't I was managing. And then this one, the hoarder that I took over for this owner because she wanted to help get it then out of the property. And she was the 3rd person that we had the sheriff show up.
Oh my gosh.
But like I said, I've never seen anything that crazy. As long as you do your background checks and do your application process correctly, you usually don't run. I'm not to say you're not going to have any problems. Just like a mortgage, they do a lot more probably in-depth research on the people getting the mortgage, and even they have people who get foreclosed on, right? So it happens. It's part of the game.
Yeah.
But
maybe not as common as people
make
it seem.
Yeah, 100%. Everyone says, well, if I rent out my property, that it's going to get destroyed. And I always say too, will a tenant take care of her property as if they were the owner of the property? Probably not. So your yard is not, if you have a green thumb, odds are your tenant doesn't have a green thumb. But your whole point is, from an investor standpoint, is make sure they're taking care of the yard well enough so that when you do end up selling the property, it just takes a little bit of elbow grease to clean it up, make it look the way that you want it to sell. I
know that you said another myth is that people think that having animals in their rentals are a bad idea.
Right. The downside to not allowing pets, a lot of people, I mean, everyone prefers to have no pets, right?
Sure.
And I guess there's a lot of things you would prefer not to have.
Well, that's my first thought, is like, oh, I don't want someone else's animal in my property.
Sure. But 67% of American households have a pet of one form or another. So when you're saying no pets, you're eliminating. So I guess it depends on how quickly you want to rent your property out. The good news is that pets are not a protective class, so you can discriminate what kind of pet they have. My suggestion always is to put in your advertising pets negotiable so that you can kind of see, because you don't want to eliminate somebody that has
like a lizard,
a hamster or something small. You're
something
like, but if you say no pets, they're just not going to apply. So you can take a look and see what they have.
A spider.
Or I have a goldfish, from the state fair or whatever. So, but when you say no pets, you're eliminating that over half of the renter pool. And in my experience, most of the time, pets don't really destroy properties as much as people do.
Right. Such a good point.
But the problem is that people as a protective class too, right? You can't say, no families or whatever can live there. So anyway, so pets, I would always suggest having pets and then having a pet deposit and something that would cover the kind of, most of the time the pets, the damage they do is just the cleanliness, right? Leaving pet fur or possibly peeing on the carpet. So if you have a pet deposit, even possibly pet rent, would be, you usually come out ahead because you can cover those costs of cleaning or getting the property back into regular rental condition when you leave. So you'll rent your property faster if you allow pets.
And I was going to say, pet owners are used to paying a pet deposit and a pet rent anyway, and so it's definitely, it sounds like it'll get rented quicker. And
this is we could have a whole podcast on this, an episode. And then I've noticed lately, and the airlines have figured it out, but we're starting to figure it out. I shouldn't say we, the government's starting to figure out the emotional support animal. So you have to be careful nowadays even saying the word pet, because you could be discriminating against somebody who has an emotional support animal, or it's rare, to me not rare, but it's you'll see more ESA, emotional support animals, than you'll actually see service animals.
Sure.
Because it's much easier to get an ESA letter than it is
definitely,
to get a
it's like an online form.
So it's really easy. I think, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of, what's the word, abuse with emotional support animal certificates. I know there's a lot of people who need it. I do have 2 boys with autism, and I see the value in the ESA or service animal. I really see the value in it, but I do believe there's a lot of people who are abusing that system. So a lot of times I've had owners in the past that are adamant about no pets in their property, and then you cannot stop the ESA.
Okay, so that's
letters.
a protected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a handicap, right?
Yeah.
So if you're saying no to that, then
You can still end up with a animal in anyway.
Anyways.
Gotcha.
So might as well just advertise for it, and then you have a little more control over possibly what animal goes in there. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Super interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Sweet. Do you have any other myths that you want to go over today?
Myths? Oh, good heavens. I think I saw one on chat.
Oh, great.
I think one of the myths I hear a lot is people think that we as property managers just don't care about their property. And I always tell owners, yes, they have more on the line. They have a mortgage to pay, or they have opportunity cost, whatever you want to call it, chance to lose more money than we do. But me as a property manager, I just don't want to put anybody into your property. I also want to make sure they're a qualified tenant, because the better tenant they are, the less work I have to do.
Right.
And the less problems I'm going to have.
Yeah.
So I'm not as invested as they are, but I still feel like I kind of treat them as a partner.
Yeah.
Even though they own the property, I don't. But I also want to make sure that when I put a tenant in there, they're going to be a good tenant.
Yeah.
Because
that's much less work for
less
you.
work, yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of times where, a tenant hasn't paid and we have to do extra work to chase them down, and it's extra work we don't want to do.
Definitely.
So we definitely want to try to make sure that we get good tenants in there for owners, because it makes it easier. Everybody wins. I guess my advice to anybody, it's if you're going to get into the rental business game, is part of the reason you hire a property manager is to take the emotion out of it. It's hard. I mean, I've done it myself. I've self-managed my own properties before, and I have a soft spot for people. I always wanted to help people, but I've seen a lot of people, including myself in the past, where they should have kept the security deposit for something, but they don't want that awkward conversation with the tenants. And so it's much easier to place that on a property manager who that's their job
have that
to
conversation.
Do. Have that conversation, or keep money, or to do what the contract says or the law says, right? And take the emotional part out of it. So I think that's my biggest advice if you ever want to hire a property manager, is really that, to be an investor and take the emotion out. Because nobody makes good decisions when you're basing it off of emotion, right? And it goes both ways, right? Because if you're upset, then you might say or do something that gets you into trouble.
Definitely.
Or if the tenant's upset, you might give more than you need to give, just because you just
feel
don't want
bad.
You feel bad.
So would you say that that's another myth, is that some people might think that they'll make more money self-managing, but then you've seen a lot of people lose money because they couldn't have those conversations?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just your security part is, I've seen a lot of homes managed by friends that I go over to their property after the tenant moved out, and I'm like, you kept the part of it for this, and this, right? Like, oh no, that just felt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like the money they would have saved from the security deposit or the cleanup after would have paid for me to manage it, and they wouldn't have the headaches of getting the phone calls all the time and begging, for items that they may or may not needed to do. So before, when I actually taught at Stringham, I guess I kind of preached like, oh, I think it's a good idea to manage the properties yourself if you only have a couple. And I totally have flipped to the other side of the table, because I did own a bunch of properties before the crash, and I almost guarantee if I had a property manager managing those, I would probably still have them today.
Really?
But going back to the emotional thing, when things got rough, I just started unloading my properties because I just didn't have time to manage them. Yeah. And I was too prideful, I guess, to want to pay somebody to do it. But I guarantee you I would be in a much better economic position right now if I would have hired a property manager to manage the properties I owned back in the day.
So would you recommend people, even if they have one property, to get a property manager, or do you think that one is manageable?
I would still recommend having a property manager. I think they can still, I mean, it just takes, to me, it's the same thing as, why do you wear your seatbelt? You wear your seatbelt just because, not because you're going to get an accident on the way home, but just in case you do. So that's why I'd always suggest having a property manager to make sure, because it just takes the one you don't want to be the one bad story that horror story everyone's talking about, right?
Yeah.
That scares people away from rental property. So I would suggest always hiring a property manager because they know what they're doing. They know the laws. They take the emotional factor out of it for the investor. And yeah, it should be better for you at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
But then again, it comes down to the property manager, right?
It's true.
We're not all created equal.
Hire a good property
There we go,
manager.
there we go.
Hire Nathan Linnell.
Yeah.
Linnell? Lionel?
Linnell.
I always say
You
Lionel.
Really?
Yeah, awesome. Do you have anything else that?
No, I
Okay.
appreciate you letting me come
Yeah.
chat about this
Yeah.
and hopefully have me back for some other topics another
Absolutely.
day.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was. I didn't even know that we were going to talk about all of those myths, and so getting all of that information was awesome.
Fair enough.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you for coming on.
Anytime.
Cool. Sweet. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for listening.